Seek Not Redemption, written by AC-1308. The prisoner was not a small man. Half a head taller than his guards, his broad shoulders stretched the prison jumpsuit, with more X's before the L than most clothing was made for. To its tortured limit. They'd had to locate extra-sized cups for him, and even then the metal bit into his wrists. It had to hurt, but the prisoner showed no sign of discomfort. His face was broad and expressionless, or perhaps the expression there was his permanent setting. Mild disinterest shading into outright dismissal. The eyes, though, those really grabbed the attention. His irises were of a brown so dark they could have been mistaken for black in poor light. It made his gaze almost hypnotic, or, to put it another way, freaky as hell. Prisoner 294-37A settled down onto a small metal folding chair. It creaked alarmingly, but held. A guard fastened his cuffs to the ring bolt in the middle of the table. He didn't put up any kind of struggle, which was good. Also, a slight relief given that he'd put 5 cops and 2 federal agents in the hospital on the night they'd captured him. 2 more cops hadn't gotten any farther than the morgue, and that was these bare hands. It was good that they'd gone in 2 a.m., when most people were either sleeping or their biorhythms are at the lowest ebb. He'd been asleep, though he'd woken almost immediately. If they'd given him any more warning than that, he might have gotten to his armory. The guy had several metal cases full of everything from metal-clad clubs to swords through to pistols and assault rifles, as well as one extremely elegant sniper rifle, plus enough ammo to prosecute a small war, or start a large one. Nobody wanted to think about how it would have gone down if he'd gotten his hands on some of that artillery before the cops got to him. By all reports, he knew how to use the weapons, both to kill and to murder. For most people, there wasn't a difference. With this guy, there was. When he was kidding, he would take 1 shot or 1 swing, and someone would be dead. But when he had murder in mind, he would take his time. Hours, or even days would pass, or so the forensics guys had assured the agent, before they would finally be allowed to die. The worst thing who was in the victims were, the agent would have been, well, if not happy, at least less horrified, if it had just been criminals, mobsters, and the like. Live by the sword, die by the sword, that sort of thing. He still would have had to bring the guy in, because the law's kind of the law, but he would have felt more a kinship with the guy, more able to talk to him man to man. But this guy, half the time the victims were normal, innocents, some wage schlub with a wife and kids, and a little fluffy dog. Nobody was exempt. The husbands would usually die first and fastest. The others, they were the ones he took his time with, even the dogs. The only light in all of this darkness was that there had never been even a suggestion of sexual assault. He just tortured and killed him. Yeah, just. And then once they had him in custody, that was when it started getting weird. They tried getting some kind of ID on him and nothing. Or rather, a dozen different IDs, each of which ended up being fake. He was the original ghost. Fingerprints, nada. So they got some real good mugshots and started an online search. Any and all pictures of this man. Which was where the weirdness came in. Originally, they set up constraints for the search, but got very little out of it. So, out of boredom and frustration, they'd thrown it wide open. Any and all, no limits. The agent carried the results in a folder that he now brought to the table. He sat it down, squared it up with the edge, then pulled out his own chair and seated himself. With an inclination of his head, the guards faded back to the corners of the interrogation room. The agent took a digital recorder from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on the table before him. In the silence of the room, the plastic on metal thick was clearly audible. He pressed the button to start recording, the tiny red LED light glaring at the ceiling. Agent Patterson conducting interview with prisoner 294-37 Alpha, September 11th, 2001. He recited tonelessly. Patterson wasn't his name, but the people who needed to know who he was would know. Prisoner was in possession of 17 sets of identity documents of varying quality, all now determined to be false. No name is being given by prisoner. He focused on the prisoner's eyes. Did you have anything to add before I start asking questions? A rumbling laugh sounded through the room. Letters, numbers, names, all meaningless. Do you have any idea how small you all are? The man calling himself Pedersen made a mental tick on the checklist only he could see. We may be small, but we have you as our prisoner. A deliberate pause. Unless there's a name you'd prefer we used instead. Prisoner is so dehumanizing after all. I've had many names. The prisoner turned to look at each of the guards in turn, then focused once more on his interlocutor. You may want to send your men out. What I've got to tell you isn't for them. Pedersen didn't think the prisoner could break free, but he'd also seen people do amazing and horrifying things when their guards relaxed vigilance for just a moment. They stay, he said. They're not allowed to repeat anything they hear in here anyway. Again, the rumbling chuckle. Your option. The name I choose for myself is Redemption. But you won't find it in any birth record. Redemption? That was a name Peterson hadn't heard for a long time. Even now it sent chills down his spine. It was supposedly connected to a supernatural killer that appeared, murdered innocents, then vanished once more. He'd seen some of the crime scene photos, at least the ones that had been taken in the last 50 years, and they had been brutally horrific. And yes, now that his mind was making the connection, they fitted the MO of the prisoner before him. A chill chased its way down his spine. Before he sternly told it to cease and desist. If this truly was Redemption, who sat before him, it both answered questions and raised mock answers. Sitting back for a moment, he flicked the folder open. This is you then, he said. It wasn't a question. Within the folder were printouts of all hits related to the prisoners. Redemption's face, garnered from the earliest days when photographs were taken through one means and another, spanning at least 2 centuries, which was patently impossible. But he thought Redemption a hoax to scare the new agents too. Redemption leaned forward, the cups clinking quietly and examining the printouts as Patterson fanned them out for his perusal. He nodded, the leonine mass of shaggy hair bobbing with emotion. Don't recall all those photos been taken, but yeah, that's me. He raised his head and skewered Peterson with his intense gaze. What are you going to do about it? Well, for one thing, I'm going to make sure that you never see the light of day again. Patterson was proud of the fact that he didn't raise his voice or swear, or do anything to make Redemption think he'd gotten to him. Son, I'm afraid that's just not going to happen. Redemption's tone was somewhere between chiding and regretful. Was there something else you wanted to do about it? Another chill flitted up and down Patterson's spine. The prisoner was so goddamn self-assured, it was scary. He wanted to reach up for his pistol, just to make sure that it was there. Secured prisoner or not, the man calling himself Redemption did anything hinky. Patterson was going to put 2 in his chest and 1 in the head. Repeat as necessary. Okay, I'll bite. How is it you're so old? I have photos of you from the Civil War. This was one of 2 questions he'd wanted to ask. The other was one he'd asked of every serial killer who ended up across the table from him. He'd never gotten a satisfactory answer. Answer that one's mixed in with the other questions you want to ask. Redemption's eyes searched his face almost mockingly. You know you want to. Agent Patterson breathed deeply, then exhaled to rid himself of the excess tension. Fine. Why? He asked. Why all those people? Why the innocents? Why the torture? Do you know you're a lucky man? Redemption seemed to have not heard the question. You're an orphan, right? 5 years old. Came home from school to find the police all around the house. Never saw your parents or sister or brother again. How does he know this? He shouldn't even know who I am. Patterson breathed deeply again. He had mourned long ago, worked through the grief. The prisoner would not provoke him. The bus broke down. I was late getting home. The police said a bad man tried to rob them. Redemption chuckled again. No, I didn't rob them. Shall I tell you your sister's last words? The barest flicker of red rage came across Patterson's eyes, and he found himself half standing. Redemption hadn't moved, observing him with amused tolerance. He wanted badly to pull his pistol and cow the man into terrified obedience. Some deep instinct told him that it would not work. He could shoot the man's kneecaps out, and there would not be the slightest reaction. I prefer to remember her in life, Patterson said, seating himself with an effort. Well, that explains why the police had no suspects. Just tell me, why? Was it worth it? Did you get something out of it? No! The answer was almost sad. Redemption's eyes never moved from his. There was no more humor in them now. I never get a thing out of it, merely the knowledge that I've done something great and terrible at the same time. Others get something out of it, but they never know. Patterson leaned forward, trying to decipher what Redemption was saying. I don't understand. Who gets something? What do they get? Redemption leaned back in his seat, the metal creaking ominously. As far back in our history as I can recall, we've been under threat. Blind chance rolls the knuckle bones, and a bad wager could have spelled doom for us 100 times over through the millennia. But there is an opposing force, one that offers. His smile was a sad one as his voice trailed off. Redemption, Patterson completed what the man was saying. What does it mean? The deep voice rumbled through the interrogation room. It means that one person is possessed with a spirit, or an entity, or whatever of redemption. They cannot die of old age. If another comes to them, filled with revenge for the loved ones that slayed them, they take on the spirit of redemption, and through their long life they become aware of the tipping points. Places and times in history where a little action will save many lives. Stop a tremendous evil. Patterson still didn't understand. So you get the chance to stop these things from happening. Avert the catastrophe. Yes. By picking a sacrifice. Innocence. Drawing out the pain and suffering ensures the survival of more innocents elsewhere. Redemption's voice was full of pain that Patterson was certain he rarely allowed himself to feel. My family, the word stuck in his throat. Redemption looked at him in the eye. An airline hijacking. 302 people. Patterson shook his head. But there are tragedies throughout history. People die all the time. Where were you then? The man sitting opposite him drew in a breath and then bellowed out. Do you not think that I may be sick of killing? The guards took a step forward, but Patterson waved them off. Redemption's fists were clenched, the big man staring down at them. I'm sure you know nothing. The rumbling voice was charged with anger. June 30th, 1908. I'd been imprisoned at St. Petersburg's jail for the crime of being a foreigner in the wrong time and place. I broke out, vanished into the city. Found a family of 6. 2 hours later, a meteorite exploded over Tunguska instead of over Moscow. 300,000 people. He took a deep breath. 1962. I murdered 3 whole families between the 15th and 20th of November. Khrushchev backed down. Everyone de-escalated. Do you want to know the death toll we walked away from for that one? Silently, Patterson shook his head. He really didn't want to know. Good, Redemption nodded in dour approval. You don't get to tell me that I'm not doing enough. Patterson frowned. I'm not trying to belittle what you're doing, but maybe you could have warned some of the people who otherwise would have died. Yes, because I never would have thought of that. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. If I do that, I stop getting warnings, and I never know if the next one will be enough to simply wipe us all out. Are you willing to take that risk? Because I wasn't. How long have you? Patterson didn't know how to finish that question. Redemption shrugged massively. His cuffs clinked. The knife I used to finish my wife's killer had a bronze blade. I don't know dates. It was a long time ago. But I'm tired of the blood, the screams, the deaths. I wanted to end. Patterson blinked, a revelation dawning on him. We didn't capture you. The smile was back, featuring a cruel twist in the corner of his lips. At last, a light in the darkness. This was never an interrogation. One final piece dropped into place. Somehow, he knew I'd be here. It's a recruitment. A single nod. Those dark, dark eyes flicked left and right, reminding Patterson of the guards. So, what's your answer? Patterson had done many bad things in his career. Sometimes he'd been hard put to justify them as being for the greater good. Now, everything made sense for the first time since he stepped off the bus and saw the police cars outside his home. Smoothly, he drew his pistol and shot Redemption 3 times in the head. Before the massive corpse had time to crash down onto the table, he turned and shot each of the guards. They would have just gotten in his way. A wash of information and energy crashed into him, filling his mind to the brim. He staggered, knowing so much more. Fuck! The World Trade Center. That's the day. I can't stop it. But well, I'll stop the next one. And the one after that. Swiping his card across the door lock, he exited the interrogation room. His whole life was over. Agent Patterson was dead and gone. Redemption was all that was left. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.